Hello, this is my Health Talk series, episode 3. Our today's guest is Sharlotha, clinical scientist from the UK. You're doing research in molecular genetics, right? So how's it going?
Currently research is on hold given the whole situation, but it means my role as a clinical scientist has sort of been more important at the moment with obviously the pandemic going on.
So genomic data could one day predict who is most likely to get a serious illness if they're infected, and may also aid in the development of treatments for the virus tailored for each individual. Some things that we know: SARS CoV-2 gets into cells by using a receptor called Angiotensin Converting Enzyme 2. So does genetic variation affect how it could get into cells?
So there's two ways to sort of look at that question. So one, you could look at the question sort of focusing on the viral and the virus and viral genomics. And there could be potential mutations that allow certain sort of species and subtypes to enter a cell more effectively or be more infectious. Then you can also look at the human side. So the ACE2 receptor, there's, for example, certain drugs that people take for hypertension or certain diabetes that actually increase the expression of that receptor. So you could make a link there that potentially those people are at a higher risk. But because it's sort of still in its infancy and early days, you don't want to sort of say that definitely leads to that, but that's a sort of area that research is focused on to see if perhaps those people are at a higher risk of the infection being more serious for them.
It could be from the drugs they're taking, the patient.
Yeah,
the underlying health condition they have.
Yeah, so it could be the underlying health condition could be either sort of due to environmental factors or potentially due to genetic factors. These can then have an impact on perhaps certain expressions of certain targets, certain proteins in the body. So using these sort of ACE2 as the example, there's environmental modifications that could impact that for an individual. But again, it does depend on your genetic makeup and perhaps how someone might respond to the environment. So it's very much sort of multifactorial, with both environmental and genetics always having this sort of give and take together with how people respond to situations.
But it's very complex. The next question: is there enough evidence out there about gene variations playing a role in the severity of the COVID-19?
For COVID-19 itself, to my knowledge, there isn't much evidence about certain gene variations, but there is a research group, their name, COVID-19 Host Genetics Initiative, trying to be a group that is inclusive of a lot of different countries to get the genome data of individuals that have been affected, and then have a look to see if perhaps there's some variances based on level of severity of infection, or perhaps some similarities that they've seen in patients that have actually had COVID-19, perhaps against individuals that weren't. And it's to understand if perhaps certain variants in the genome are making people's infection worse for them, or potentially having more of a protective effect in some individuals who then perhaps were more of a carrier or silent carrier. We've been hearing those terms lately. So there's a lot of digging to see if perhaps the genetics could be involved in this. But because it's very early days, there's not going to be anything conclusive for quite a while. But you could look back at other coronaviruses, so SARS, the first outbreak in 2003, and MERS. There's a lot of papers out there to suggest certain genetic links for those. So it wouldn't be too far of an assumption that there will also be some kind of genetic underpinning to the severity of COVID-19 infections.
It could be possible, yeah, but there's not enough evidence regarding that.
Yeah.
What are the promises for the near future in drug therapies and vaccines?
So at the moment, I think in terms of near future, if there is a vaccine or a drug therapy, it will likely be something that's been repurposed. So there's different research at the moment that's moving into clinical trial phases that is looking at a drug that's already used for something else. So there's a drug used for parasite infections, for example, that they're looking to see if that can be repurposed to be used to combat SARS CoV-2 in infected individuals. Also looking at certain vaccines that have been designed for other respiratory illnesses, and to see if there's a way that those vaccines could be manipulated to target SARS CoV-2. So the promise in perhaps drug therapies or vaccinations in sort of my understanding and my view, will be a repurposing of something for a quick fix of this sort of current pandemic, and then as time prevails and as research can continue, there can then be something perhaps more stringently put together for then a vaccination program perhaps in the future for people who are in the risk group, or perhaps how they do the flu shot once a year if you're a risk individual or someone who works in a certain environment, those kinds of things going forward. And then there's the sort of personalised medicine approach as well. If they do start to dig into the genome, and if there are hotspots in individuals, you could then look to perhaps investigate how someone might respond to a drug or a vaccine to then see what would be the best treatment or prevention for them.
Some folks are making outrageous claims that the COVID-19 was man-made, and how you could tell if it's genetically engineered in the lab or not.
So, in my understanding, you can do phylogeny studies. So that's tracing back sort of, it's almost looking at a genetic tree. You look back at the genome of the virus and you can trace it back to kind of its original, where it came from. So the phylogeny does suggest it's come from a bat coronavirus when you look at it, which is where then the claims of it being man-made, potentially you wouldn't be able to prove that, because you can see how it has evolved over time and how it's varied, and through selection how it's changed its genome, and then it's made that last step from zoonotic to then sort of human infection. So the science would definitely suggest that it's not something that's been man-made. I just think people like a story.
Yeah, there's so many conspiracy theories. There is human leukocyte antigen could also tell how better or worse we are equipped to fight off certain germs, including SARS CoV-2, the virus that caused COVID-19. Could you tell us more about it?
Sort of literature, you tend to see that written as HLA, and you can be HLA typed, so that's looking at someone's genes and to see what type of the antigen they have. This isn't just specific to infections. They use it for example, stem cell donations, and things like that, because it's part of the pathway where perhaps your body might reject a donation that you have. So it's been known for a very long time that there's different types that individuals carry, and that your immune response will have an impact based on this. So there's research to suggest that depending on the variation you have, that it will depend on how severe perhaps you may become infected or how susceptible you are to certain diseases. So they can look into the different types to then see if they're having an impact on someone's response to SARS CoV-2 and then the COVID-19 disease. I have sort of seen that there's a lot of research from clinical studies being done, so sort of blood's taken from patients in intensive care to then look at these kind of things to see if a certain group of patients who were perhaps worse off, who ended up needing to have oxygen and things like that, might have had a specific type. So it's then looking to see if there's links or similarities, or potentially if there's any differences. So the HLA will definitely be something that's looked at in that sense as well.
Yeah, is there any more information you could share if I missed anything about genes?
Currently, other than the studies we've discussed that are ongoing, there's, to my knowledge, there's not any particular gene or anything that's been discovered or discussed as yet that's having a major impact. But it is almost digging into the literature and seeing the kind of hotspots and genes involved in other respiratory illnesses, especially other coronaviruses, because the likelihood is that this isn't too dissimilar in the way it functions to those. But it was the genetics of the virus itself were different enough for it to be classed as a novel virus, but there'll be a lot of similarities. I believe the original SARS was also the ACE2 receptor, how it entered the cell. So we don't, I know there's always been sort of, during this pandemic, it's uncharted territory, and it's, you know, it's quite scary for some people, but we just have to trust the research is there, and it's about piecing it together, and with our new understanding as well as we go along to know how best to combat this.
Yeah, it's important people to read information from the reliable sources. Yeah, I think we're done. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck in your research.
I wish you luck with your series.
Thank you.
If your questions made sense, and I really liked, actually, since the first sort of suggested questions. You spoke about the human leukocyte antigen and the ACE2, which was really good that you brought them up, because they're the two sort of areas that I was going to mention if you didn't say them themselves. So it tied in quite nicely with what I'd thought would be interesting to share and what's sort of most known and things like that. So you can tell you've done your research.
Yeah, it's something, it's area I'm interested as well. I used to work for Genomics England.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did while I was doing my MSc in Global Public Health and Policy.
Oh, wow. I went to their Genomics England had a conference this last year now, actually.
No,
which I went to.
I wasn't in the UK. I went back to UAE, Dubai.
Oh, okay. Is that where you are now? No, you're in Georgia?
I'm in Georgia. Currently, I'm in Georgia. Yeah. I really miss UK, London especially. It was great experience.
Amazing.
You did a great job as well. Thank you for joining me.